Hello, and welcome to Palisade Corporation's webcast, Gambling, Money Management, and Monte Carlo Simulation, presented by Wayne Winston, Professor of Operations and Decision Technologies of the Kelly School of Business at Indiana University. My name is Jameson Romeo Hall, and I will be your host today, and I'll be available to help answer WebEx technical questions by chat. If you experience technical difficulties joining this WebEx session, please dial 1-866-229-3239. At this time, all attendees are in a listen-only mode. Please note that as an attendee, you are part of a larger audience today. The attendee list is suppressed to maintain attendee privacy. We will be holding a Q&A session at the conclusion of today's presentation. You may ask an online question anytime throughout the presentation today by clicking on the question mark icon located on the floating toolbar. I would also encourage you to visit our website and sign up for a free trial download of our software, including our lead products, At Risk, and the Decision Tool Suite version 5.7. We invite you to sit back and relax and enjoy today's presentation. Wayne, in a minute, you have...
Should I do it now? Should I share it?
You have presenter control.
Okay. Share my desktop. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Hi, everyone. I'm glad you took time out of your busy day to hear this. I think it'll be fun and hopefully informative. And we will talk about the NCAA tournament, since I'm sure most of you are interested in that. I hope Butler wins, but we'll see what happens. I doubt they will win the whole thing. Can they, Jameson, can you see my screen?
Look there.
Crap. You see an Excel spreadsheet?
Yep, sure do.
Okay. So I gave sort of this speech with a few modifications at the Palisades conference in Las Vegas, and I think I'm correct that next year's conference will be in Las Vegas. What is it, November 9th and 10th?
It'll be November 10th and 11th.
10th and 11th. Yeah, I should have figured that out from the dates. But At Risk is a great vehicle to analyze gambling, and for those of you who are in academics, I think it's a great way to engage your students. I mean, you're not encouraging them to be gamblers, but most of them are really interested in this stuff, and to show them that math and Excel modeling and At Risk can solve some problems that interest them, I think engages them and gets them interested. And those of you in the business world, I think, know how important At Risk is to your business. But I mean, you're probably, if you're signed up today, you're probably just interested in gambling. So we'll talk about a bunch of games today, and I mean, I probably can't tell you how to like retire and make a fortune gambling, but we can talk about, I mean, how we figure out what the odds are on various games that are commonly played casino games and sports betting. Okay, so we'll start with craps, which many of you probably know how craps works. Okay, and Jameson, if you see questions, can you tell me, because I don't really see that screen, I just see my Excel screen.
You keep going, and I'll read them all off at the end.
Okay, that's fine. But if there's an important one in the middle, just interrupt me.
Oh, I
mean, that's fine. I don't care. So craps, you toss 2 dice. Dice come up 1 through 6. And so you know on the first toss, a 2, 3, or 12, you lose. A 7 or 11, you win. And otherwise, you keep going. So what happens if you keep slow response when I'm typing here? I don't know if that's the WebEx. Otherwise, keep going. Okay, sometimes when I type it just won't respond. Okay, let me see if I can put that G there. Okay. And what happens when you keep going? Suppose you throw a 6 on the first roll. Well, you keep going to either match your first toss, which was a 6, or you get a 7. If the 7 comes before the 6, you lose. Otherwise, you win. So 7 on the first roll, toss of 2 dice, wins for you, but 7 afterwards loses for you. So the question is, what is the chance of winning? And if you're really good at probability, and this would be a good problem for you, those of you who are good at probability, figure out exactly the probability of winning at craps. It's not that hard. The answer is 49.3%. But most of my students who are MBAs, I mean, they don't know probability that well, and it's a pretty hard conditional probability problem. So I teach them how to do this in At Risk, and they just love it. And I mean, it's a pretty fair game, and we'll see later. I mean, losing 1.4% is better than some of the other games in Vegas. And so playing craps, you can have some fun. And And the nice thing for Vegas, I think, is everybody knows somebody who's won at craps because it's a pretty fair game. And so you find out your neighbor won $5,000 playing craps, you'll go to Vegas thinking you'll win. The casino smiles all the way to the bank because the chances of them, they know they'll win more than half the time, so they won't really be behind. But let's see if we can learn how to use that risk to model craps. And Jameson, they'll be able to get all these files, right? You'll be able, is there a place you can put all, I think they've already put on the Palisade site my files from the keynote speech.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, great. And the NCAA tournament simulation I'll send you after the talk, and then people can have that if they want it.
Oh, good, good.
Oh, and I think there's a version of it up there. But how would you model, in any use of at-risk, what you want to know is how do you model the uncertainty? And I guess what's nice about gambling, the uncertainty is really clear because it's like a deck of cards, it's a roulette wheel, or it's dice. In sports, it's not so clear. But where we have real issues with that risk in the real world is how do we model future stock prices? How do we model the future stock price in Japan, given the terrible tragedy there, or American stock prices, given what's happening in Libya and Japan? I mean, there's just, that risk lets you put in your assumptions, but I mean, it's a lot easier to model the uncertainties in gambling than in the real world. And so that's, I mean, gambling is pretty good for classroom use for that reason, and it's fun. So what random variable in at risk would you use to model the dice? Well, it's equally likely you toss a 1 through 6, and I hope you know that's a risk D uniform. So here I put a risk D uniform 1 through 6, and if you look at defining distributions, we'll see in a minute here, it's just running really slow with the WebEx, I guess. I can't even get that to run. I've got my at-risk up, but okay, there it goes. There it goes. It's equally likely to be a 1 through 6. And so you don't know how long a game of craps will go. Again, unfortunately, I just can't even see. I'm just trying to move my mouse and okay, here we go. All right, so now the interesting thing about craps from the standpoint of writing a spreadsheet is you don't know how long it's going to go. It could end on the first toss. It could keep going theoretically 1,000 tosses. But you can work out that a game of craps will almost certainly end before the 50th toss. And so what I've done here is just copy across these risky uniforms, and I assumed it might go 50 rolls of the dice. The trick is to set up the logic so that you get the right outcome of the game based on the dice rolls. Okay, so we'll do this rather quickly because we just don't have a lot of time to do all these things. So in row 4 here, you'll see the formula. That's the total dice roll, and that's what keys the game. So how do you model craps? And the beauty of this is from the standpoint of teaching. Craps is simply 2 if statements. There's an if statement for the outcome of the game in the first toss, and then there's an if statement on what happens after the first toss. And we have to sort of have what's called a counter. Basically, after any dice roll, either we've lost the game, we've won the game, or it's still going. A 0 will mean we've lost the game. A 1 will mean we've won the game. And a 2 means we're still going. So the first toss, what's the game status? It's very simple. If you throw a 2, 3, or 12, and I hope you're good at if statements because if statements are the key to modeling in Excel. It's sort of the programming we do in Excel. And I'm really proud that I get the students really good at using if statements through using at-risk and also teaching solver models involving if statements that we solve with the Excel 2010 solver, which now has evolutionary algorithms, which I urge you all to look at. But see, this says if you throw a 2, 3, or 12, you lose the game. A 0 means you lost. A 7 or 11, you win. And otherwise, I put a 2, you keep going. And so if I hit the F9 key here, a 12, oh, I lost the game. A 5, I keep going. A 10, I keep going. A 7, I went past that, sorry. 11, I won the game. Okay, now the trick is, what do you do on the second toss? And you can just copy this formula across. Well, in the words of the immortal Yogi Berra, it's not over till it's over. Okay, but to paraphrase Yogi Berra, once the craps game is over, the future dice rolls don't affect the outcome, and your if statement must reflect that. So this if statement starts out, if the outcome of the game in a previous toss was a 0, which means I lost, or I won the game, you keep the outcome the same because you can't change it unless you believe in time travel, which I don't. Well, physically you could do it, but it's very unlikely. Now, so if the game doesn't end on the first toss, you would keep going. And so you would say, does the second toss match the first toss? If it does, you won. Then if that's not true, if the second toss was a 7, then you lost. Otherwise, you keep going. And if you simply copy that across, you've modeled all of craps. That's all there is to it. So in other words, if I hit F9 key, the outcome of the game here points to the 50th column, but this is my output cell for at risk. So here, I won the game on the first toss. Notice it stays, I'm a winner the whole way. First toss, I got an 8. I keep going, but then I threw a 7, which means I lost. Okay, let's try something different here. It's just not recalculating very well. Okay, I won on the first toss. I stay a winner. I want to somehow... Problem is when I hit F9 here, nothing happens, and then a whole bunch of them happen. It's just got a big delay. Okay, there I lost on the first toss, and I can stay... sorry, I didn't lose on the first toss. I threw a 10, and then I lost when I threw a 7. I want to have something where I win after the first toss. Let's see. I'll get one eventually. Well, it doesn't seem to want to do that. But the logic here is right, so let me run this thing. Okay, 1 on the first toss. Okay, good. I threw an 8 on the first toss, a 3, a 10, a 3, a 10. We keep going. I threw an 8, I win, and it stays that I'm a winner. So I could run this thing 50,000 times, and basically, I'm not going to do that. It just takes too long. But let's run 5,000 and see how close we come to 49.3%, and I'll keep talking about the next thing so we don't waste any time here. This is not the fastest computer in the world, but I just got the best internet connection, so the quickest one, so that's why I chose to use it in our presentation. Okay, well, it's done already, except I didn't make that an output cell like a foolish person. So let me quickly make it an output cell and run it again. Okay, so I often forget to make things output cells. It's very frustrating. Okay, that's not Palisade's fault, that's my fault. Okay, so I run this thing 5,000 times. Okay, now if I would browse results, okay, I got 48.7%. See, if you give yourself a 1 if you win and a 0 if you lose, the mean of that cell is the chance that you win. Whenever you want to estimate the probability of something happening, you should give yourself a 1 if it happens and a 0 if it doesn't, and just take the mean of that cell. And so I got 48.7%. If I'd run this 100,000 times, I would have got the 49.3 pretty much exactly. I mean, and for our students, this is really nice because they would not understand the calculations involved in computing this exactly. Well, let's go on to our next game here because that actually took longer than I had hoped. Keno. And if I can give you one piece of advice, don't play Keno. Every game in the casino is sort of favors the casino, except possibly blackjack, which you might have an edge. There's debate on that. But in Keno, it's a terrible bet. I mean, you on the average, you lose, perhaps we said you lose 1.4 cents per dollar. The house edge is 1.4% because you have a 40.93% chance of winning, a 50.7% chance of losing. On a typical Keno bet, you lose 20 cents on the dollar, which is almost as bad as the slots. Nobody really knows. I should talk about the slots real quickly because when people play those slots and just love those slots, the problem is you don't know what's on how many cherries, how many pairs, and how many things are there. So you can't really figure out the odds, and you don't know how they're figuring out the payoff. Now, here's a great thing for Palisades. A couple of my students work for the gaming companies, and they use at-risk to figure out the payoffs on the slots. Okay, so that's sort of a very popular job for my students to go after. So, I mean, there's Bally is one of the companies, and there's another company, I can't remember the name where my students were. But at-risk is used in a lot of the game, just about all the gaming companies that make slot machines to figure out, basically, to design the slots, to make sure the payouts have the right properties and stuff like that. You have to write complicated if statements to model the payoffs and then see what happens. So that's a nice career path for lots of people. So how does Keno work? Well, basically, there's a wheel which I think has usually the numbers 1 through 80. Oops. I hate it when Excel puts a date format in there, so we'll do this. So you get the numbers 1 through 80. And then the usual way of doing this is you pick out 10 numbers 1 through 80. So I'll just assume I pick out 1 through 10. Okay, let's just assume I pick out 1 through 10. It could be any 10 of the 80 numbers that I pick out. And then the wheel will sort of pick out 20 of the 80 numbers, and basically what determines how you do in the game of Keno is how many of your 10 numbers are among the first 20 that come up or something like that. And basically the payoffs are something like this. If on the first 20 numbers that the wheel shows, 5 of your 10 numbers came up, you get paid off at 2 to 1. If 6 come up, you get paid off at 18 to 1. If 7 come up, you get paid off at 180 to 1. And if 8 come up, you get paid at 1,400 to 1. If you get 9 matches to your 10 numbers, 2,800 to 1. 10 matches, you get paid at 25,000 to 1. So this is, I think, why people play this game, because they don't understand probability. They say, gosh, I picked 10 numbers, and they're going to throw 20 at me, and half my numbers may come up. I'm a lucky person, and I'll make $25,000 on a $1 bet. How can I not do this? Well, you're pretty dumb if you do this. Okay, and you can actually compute the exact odds on keno, which I have here using permutations and combinations. But how do we get at risk to model keno? So what's the uncertainty here? You got to pick 20 numbers out of the first 80, 20 numbers out of 1 through 80, and you can't repeat them, which makes it a little tricky to see what came up. And then all you have to do is count how many numbers matched, and you can run at risk to get your payoffs, and that's what I went through in the spreadsheet. But a lot of the games in the casinos are basically, you have to sort of sample without replacement. In other words, the number 18 can't come up twice, it only can come up once. So what is the method in at risk? There's many ways to do this, of course, but what is my method, or the method I like, to sample without replacement? Well, the way I use is this. If I can get the screen to move over. Yeah. So I used our friendly risk uniform function, and it could be any random variable, it doesn't matter, to generate a number that's equally likely to be anywhere from 0 to 1. So in column D, if I hit the F9 key, you see that my recalc just is so slow. Oh, there it goes. The numbers from 0 to 1, I have 80 copies of numbers from 0 to 1. Now, what do I pick to be the first number of the 20 that comes up on the wheel? Well, I just chose the biggest random number, and it's easy to do this in Excel. See, notice, here's the 20 numbers that come up on the wheel of keno, or whatever you want to call it. Not to be confused with the Wheel of Fortune, I guess. Okay, which is another game in Vegas, I guess. I don't know much about that one. Okay, so why did a 5 come up first? Because it was the biggest random number. Why did a 49 come up second? Because I hope it was the second biggest random number if I scroll down. There it is, second biggest random number. See, what this does is give every number the same chance of occurring, because every number 1 through 80 has the same chance of seeing the biggest random number next to it. We can't have ties because the risk, the uniform can't tie to 16 decimal points. If it does, I apologize, but I don't think that's going to happen. There's no way two of those risky uniforms will be exactly the same to 16 decimal points, so I'll never get a tie. So this is how you sample with replacement. You get, or you want to shuffle a deck of cards, same thing, as we'll see later. So basically, you run this through, and I counted, okay, how many times did I get the one? In other words, the 20. Here's the 20 things that came up the wheel in the wheel on column H. And so basically, how many of my numbers came up? Well, I see a 5 came up. I use a count F. An 8 came up. A 9 came up, and a 10 came up. So I got 4 matches. And so over here, I figured out using the risk target function, what is the probability that basically we get exactly 4 matches, exactly 5. See, that formula using the wonderful risk target function says, what's the chance I get less than or equal to 4 matches minus the chance I get less than or equal to 3 matches? And so then basically, we can paste in the probabilities for that risk. I ran this, I'm not going to run it 5,000 times to save time for you. But I run this a bunch of times, and basically I find out 14.1% of the time I got 4 matches. The exact probability should be 14.7% of the time using basic probability. So you can see all my at-risk values are close, and I didn't run more than 1,000 iterations. But basically you can figure out the expected payoff here using the exact, I use the exact numbers here, and the at-risk wouldn't be much different. You multiply the probability of 5 matches times you would win get paid $2. Probably winning 6 matches, you get paid $18 profit. Probably winning 7 matches times you'd get $180 profit. So you sum a product to get the expected payoff, and it's 81 cents on the dollar, which means is you lose 19 cents on the dollar. So one of the great mysteries of life is, why do people play this game? I really don't know. I mean, they really shouldn't. I mean, there are many other more important mysteries in life, but other casino game, I mean, there are so many better options at the casino if you want to have fun and gamble. This is really just giving the casino money, but it's there. I mean, you can see there's lots of space allocated to it. Okay, poker. And it's real interesting. I mean, guys, poker's interesting to me because if you saw the Jeopardy tournament, I was on Jeopardy and won 2 games. I mean, and that was in New York State. I mean, not in Ithaca, I guess, but but basically Watson creamed the two humans, and you probably think, God, the computer's just smarter. I actually think the computer won because it was better on the buzzer, because in Jeopardy on the buzzer, you have to wait for Alex to finish reading his question, and a red light comes on the screen. And basically, you can't buzz in before the red light or you're locked out a tenth of a second. And I really, watching it, I could see that Ken and the other guy, Brad, I guess his name was, they were buzzing in almost every question. They knew about as many as the computer, but they couldn't get buzzed in. And I know they're great at buzzing because they were great Jeopardy players, and that's the key to the game. But the interesting is we know the computer beat Kasparov at chess, but computers are not that good at poker. I was reading an article on that last week, and so it's interesting. And computers should be able to do the probabilities real well, but I guess they can't deal with the human mind and how it gambles and stuff like that. And I'd be interested to see in the future if there's a computer challenge challenging the greatest Hold'em players in the world. And basically, I'll talk a little bit about Hold'em, but I'm not, I mean, when I played in college, I'd play high-low, and that's the game I really liked. And I mean, I guess ESPN has made Hold'em such a popular game, but I'm not the biggest fan of Hold'em, but I'll talk a little bit about it. But if you want a good book on poker and give a lot of examples on just expected value, Thursday Night Poker, I don't remember the author's name, but I really think that that's the best book on poker. I mean, he really goes through and explains things, and you don't really want to do exact simulations. In poker, what you have to do is approximate probability calculations in your head, and particularly in Hold'em. And you have to figure out sort of, if you get, like if you're drawing to a flush, if you get that flush, is it, given the probability of getting the flush and what you think you'd make on the flush, is the expected value going to be positive? Because a lot of people stay in because they think they'll get the flush, but you can usually figure out, I know that this many hearts left in the deck, I need a heart, this many cards left in the deck, you can just, or drawing two to a flush, you should be able to figure those things out in your head. And that's a necessary condition to be a good poker player. It's not sufficient. I was good at probability, but I was a horrible poker player in college. My philosophy on poker is there are very few great poker players who were A students in college. The people who are the B and C students and can read people, they're the great poker players. At least that was true at MIT. This one guy got all C's at MIT, but he cleaned us out every night. I mean, he would just kill us. But let's talk about draw poker. So, I mean, how do you figure out, let's say, the probability of two pair, a full house, or a pair, and flushes are a little bit different, and I mean, I didn't do that in this spreadsheet, but you've got the 52 cards, so it goes 1 through 13, then 1 through 13 again. Of course, I could make these spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs if I wanted to. So how do I draw a 5-card? What's the probability of getting two pair, a full house, or a pair in 5-card draw? And then you could work out drawing to that. So what you have to do is create a shuffle deck. But this is exactly what we did in Keno. So in other words, I have these random numbers with risk uniform in column E, and basically we'd figure out what's the first card. Well, the first card here is a 9. That means the highest random number must have been next to a 9 in column D. So where's the highest random number? I used the Excel rank function to find the highest random number. By the way, in Excel 2010, they added a new version of the rank function that treats ties differently. And if you do use Excel 2010, the percentile and the percent rank function were also changed, I think, for the better in 2010. So be aware of that when we get 2010. Okay. And so the highest random number was the 35th, let's see, it was row 25 there. And so that was the 22nd card in the listing here, and that's a 9. So I got a 9 first, then I got a 3, then I got a 4, then I got 11, then I got a 12. And the key here is using a VLOOKUP with a false. You need that false in there to make it work. So then I found out how many 3s did I count, how many of each type of pair, how many did I get of each denomination, 1 through 13. 11 is a jack, I guess, 12 a king, etc. So I got 1 3, I got 1 4, I got 1 9. This is a crummy hand, no pairs. Let's do better. Okay. Not much luck here. Okay, I got a pair of 10s. Okay, see, I got 2 10s there. So I have to use if statements to count what kind of hand I get. So basically, the 2 pair would mean there's got to be, for 2 of the denominations, I got 2 of them. Okay. Now, what's a full house? I got to get 3 of one and 2 of another. What's a pair? I've got to get, it's not a full house, it's not 2 pair, and I've got to get basically, I've got to get 2 of one of these denominations. And so you just run this, you take the mean of these cells with the risk mean function, you run it through a couple of thousand times, so you get the probabilities of 2 pair, a full house, and a pair. Okay. Well, and you can do 7-card stud. You can. The point is, once you've got the deck shuffled like I do here, in other words, I just drew the first 5 cards, but I could draw all 52 cards. Just in other words, the first card is the largest random number. The second card is the second largest random number. Then I have a shuffled deck, and I could simulate 7 cards. Any poker game I want, if I'm good with if statements, I could simulate probabilities on it. But Hold'em is the game you probably all know and see on ESPN, and you're probably very interested in Hold'em. So, I mean, there's a book by Slansky, the great, I guess the best guy on Hold'em is this guy, David Slansky. Any of his books are fine. Depends on your level of expertise, but they're cheap. They're very inexpensive paperbacks, but, I mean, they're very good. But, I mean, I still think the great Hold'em book has yet to be written after buying these books to prepare for the keynote speech and for our talk today. Because, I mean, it doesn't seem to me that after looking at those books, I really knew enough to be good at Hold'em. But you know how Hold'em works. You get 2 cards. Basically, you get 2 cards, and then they'll turn up 3 in the middle, and then there's betting and betting again, etc. Seems to me the real key to Hold'em, and I couldn't find this on the Internet. Maybe I didn't look in the right place. How many combinations are there? I mean, you can get 52 cards. 52 times 51, really, divided by 2. You don't care about the order. There's a lot of ways. I mean, basically, I mean, well, you can get ace, 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 king, things like that, and then they could be the same suit, or things can be, or you can have 2 things of the same suit or different suit, or they could be possibly a 3 and a jack and a queen could give you a chance at a straight, or a 10 and a jack. So what you want to know is how to rank those 2-card combinations, and I couldn't find anybody who did that. In other words, given a set of 2-card combinations, how much better is the final hand going to look? I mean, if I got, let's say I got a 2 of spades and I got a 6 of clubs, I mean, I might luck out and get a good final hand, but I mean, it's probably pretty unlikely. But I got a pair of aces, gosh, I should get a good final hand. Or I got an ace, king of spades, I should get a good final hand. To me, the key thing is, even if you don't know how to read people, if you could really figure out how much better the final hand's likely to be based on those first 2 cards, because everything else is in common in the middle. And so, if you, I mean, you'll get beat a lot if there's a lot of players. And I guess Hold'em is popular because you could have 20 players playing, you know, because other games you can only have 7 players playing with a deck of cards. Some of those games, and so figuring out the probability. I mean, how like a 7-player game? Okay, if you dealt out. I mean, and they've done all this stuff in the ESPN. They put up the probabilities, which are obtained by simulation, that basically somebody will have the winning hand and stuff like that. They know how to do all. Somebody did all that work. I don't know if they used that risk, but they wrote a computer simulation. But the key thing I think to understand is, okay, I mean, if I've got a given 2-card combination and there's this many players, what's the chance, knowing nothing else, that I'm going to end up with the winning hand if everybody stays in or things like that? I mean, and maybe that's been done, but I just haven't seen it. But but the key thing to know in poker to win is psychology. Again, is somebody bluffing or not, and approximate probabilities like pot odds. In other words, figure out maybe I have a 20% chance to make this flush, I'll win $100. 80% chance I don't make it, I'll lose what I put in. And if the expected value is positive, then go with it. I mean, and that's being able to size up pot odds, which means expected value if you get given the chances that you might get the hand you're drawing to and versus that you won't get that hand. That, I think, is really the key thing. Let's move on to roulette. We're about halfway through our talk, which I think I'll just adjust as we go on to make sure we're done by 2. So if I go to roulette, this is the easiest game. I wish the other games were so simple. So roulette, you probably know, there's 1 through 36, and they alternate red and black, and then there's 0 and 00, which are green, so that gives the casino an edge, because if people bet on red or black, the chance they'll win is 18 out of 38 instead of 18 out of 36, so that's not good. Okay, so how would you simulate roulette? Well, that's so simple. A wristy uniform 1 through 38, and then just use a lookup. So a 1 corresponds on the wristy uniform to a 0, and then a 2 corresponds to a 00, etc. And so if I hit F9 there, I can see there's the wristy uniform. It's a 16, so what came up was a 14 red. So basically, this is the outcome based on that risk of the wheel. So I set up a little spreadsheet here where you can bet electronically and it won't cost you any money, because in general, roulette, if you think about this real quickly, if roulette, you don't need that risk to tell you this, but if they're paying off 35 to 1 and you bet on a number, a 38th of the time, you win $35, plus the rest of the time, you lose your dollar. So you're going to lose 2/38 is your expected value, which is minus 5 point something percent. What is it? Minus 5.1 or minus 5.2%. Actually, I think it's minus 5.3%. Okay, so I mean, the average, you're going to lose a nickel. So that's worse than craps, but it's a lot better than keno, and I think it's more fun to play roulette. I mean, at the Palisades conference, I played roulette. Of course, I lost, but hopefully you'll still listen to the talk after that, hearing that. Okay, but so what I did here is I said, you can bet on a color. So here I chose the number of dollars. You can pick a color, red or black, to bet on. And then I said, how many dollars do you want to bet on each number? And then I spun the wheel, and I figured out basically how we did. See, there I won $3. I bet $8 on red, and I picked 5 numbers, but it came up red, so I won $3. And so what you can do is try any combination of strategies between colors and numbers with this little spreadsheet, and you can compute the mean expected winnings or wins or loss amount you win or lose. And no matter what you do, you're going to lose 5% around, because the color bet, basically the way it pays off, it loses about 5%. So I mean, I don't see any easy way you're going to make money on roulette. But another Palisades product might help you. If you go on the internet and you use Bing or Google to search for beating roulette, a lot of people think, and this may have used to have been true, that basically if you recorded the sequences of a roulette wheel for hours on end, you could predict what's coming next. A lot of people believe this about the stock market. There was a movie, Pi, on that, which is a great movie. This kid thought he could predict the stock market, and everybody came after him wanting to kill him. Okay, I think it was directed by the same person that did the Black Swan movie. I might be wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he also did Requiem for a Dream. Is that the same guy?
That's the guy.
Okay, yeah, he's a genius. But Pi, I think the audience that is listening to me would probably 95% of you would enjoy the movie Pi. I don't know about Black Swan; it scared me to death, but that's a different issue. Okay, but basically, let's think about it for a minute. Suppose there was something to the view that if you know the tosses of the roulette wheel, the last 20 tosses, you can tell you can predict the next one with better likelihood than saying it's 1 out of 38th chance of being a 0 or a double 0 or something like that. Well, then your neural tools might help you with that. What your dependent variable would be the next toss, and your independence might be the last 10 or 20 tosses, and then let's make it simple. You have suppose you've recorded 5,000 consecutive roulette results, and you have just keep track of the numbers and also the color being red or black. So suppose you just want to predict, will it be red or black? Okay, so in other words, your dependent variable would be red or black, your independent would be the last 20 numbers, let's say, and basically, if there's a pattern there, neural tools ought to be able to pick it up. Of course, I don't think you can bring neural tools into the casino, but I mean, it would be interesting. Because the people who wrote the book, Edward Thorpe, who's the god of gambling and also the stock market, as far as I'm concerned. We'll get to him later. And I mean, I think somebody needs to write a great biography of Edward Thorpe like they wrote of the physicist Feynman, because his life's been, I think, just as interesting, and he's done fantastic stuff. I mean, just unbelievable stuff. Gets no publicity except in our field. But basically, Thorpe, I think, did think for a while that charting the wheel would help. Because it seems like it's basic physics. I mean, if the guy's going to spin the wheel at the same rate, I mean, it should be physics to figure out what comes out next. I mean, there's a lot of error in there, but it does make sense there might be a deterministic relationship. It's just probably so hard to figure out that nobody can do it well. But if anything can do it, a package like neural tools can. So I think that would be quite interesting. Let's go on to our next game here, because I've got Baccarat, or Chemin de Fer as it's called, and then there's Blackjack, and we'll talk about the tournament for sure. So Baccarat, I really think this is a cool game, and see, everybody's into Blackjack, but I think Blackjack, if you want to be really good, you got to count the cards, and that's really stressful, and I don't think most people can do it well. The 21 movie, I think, was very unrealistic, gave people unrealistic expectations that you can always win money. I think you need a bunch of people to make that work, and they use so many decks of cards, I think it's difficult. But the way Baccarat works, or I said Baccarat, I'm not sure how to spell Baccarat. Chemin de Fer, I think, is the other name. And one thing about this, reading all the gambling books, what they said was, an elegant class of people plays Baccarat. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. But if you want to meet some rich people, probably you'd hang around the Baccarat table more than the craps table. Okay, I mean, it seems to be the game that like if you went to Monte Carlo, I mean, the really rich people and the jet set people, that's the game they seem to like. Okay. I mean, our ordinary Americans seem to not play Baccarat very much. Not that there's anything wrong with ordinary Americans, just if you want to meet the elegant jet set person, you have a much better chance of doing that at the Baccarat tables, according to the books. Okay, so the way this works is both of you get, the player and the bank or the casino get 2 cards, and you add the total, but you do it mod 10. So like a Jack, 10, Queen, or King counts as a 10. So basically, if you got a Jack and you got a 5, that counts as a 5. If you got 2 5s, that adds up to 10, that counts as a 0. And so, and there's no strategy in this game because the rules, the game is totally, once the cards come out, you don't have a choice. Like in blackjack, you can either stand or take a card. In Baccarat, you can't do that. And I didn't quite get this simulation totally done, but I'll just tell you how the game works and what the results are. But I mean, I think it would be a good class project for people who know at risk to simulate this because it's just not that hard. Okay, so if the player gets an 8 or 9 total on the first 2 cards, they turn their card over, the game ends, and the player and the bank turn their card over, and the higher card wins, and a tie, nobody wins. Oh, you can bet on a tie, but basically it turns out the house has a 12% advantage if you're betting that the player and the bank tie, so you don't want to do that. That's really a bad bet. Because Baccarat otherwise has a 1% house edge, 1.2%. I mean, it's really pretty much a fair game. And so somebody very clever figured out these strategies to make it fair, so you'll see how it's determined. So in 8 or 9, if your first 2 cards totaled 8 or 9, again, it's mod 10. There's a mod function in Excel. You would add up the results, and mod, comma 10 would be what you really look at. If the player gets a 6 or 7, okay, if he gets anything else, what happens? If he has a 6 or 7, he basically is going to stand there, okay, and then if he gets a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or a 10 means a 0 here, then he's going to draw a card. Okay, and so then what does the banker do? Okay, well the banker, what he does on the net 3rd card depends on what the player does. Okay, so like let's look at this example here. If the banker's got a total of 3, and I mean they don't turn, if it's not an 8 or 9, they don't turn their cards over. So the banker gets a 3, okay. Then basically, if the player got anything, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, or 10, then the banker will draw a card. And I'll try. I can't explain all of these, but I mean, it's the rules of the game, but they're also fairly logical strategies if you were trying to win. But you can play this with your neighbor, and you could just you can either take a card or not take a card. It's your choice. Okay, but if the player gets an 8, then the banker doesn't draw. Let's focus on that. See, if the banker has a 3 and the player draws an 8, let's think about this. You don't know what the player had down, but he was probably equally likely to have, well, it's probably more likely to have a 10 because there's more ways to get a 10. But suppose he's equally likely to have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or a 10, and he gets an 8. Well, an 8 with a 1 would give him a 9. An 8 with a 0 would give him an 8. An 8 with a, an 8 with a 2 would give you a 0. An 8 with a 3 would give you a 1. An 8 with a 4 would give you a 2. An 8 with a 5 would give you a 3. So the player, basically, his total will end up at 8, 9, 0, 1, or 2. Okay, and if the banker has a 3, he's pretty likely to win. I mean, he would beat the 0, the 1, and 2. The high score wins. 0 is not a high score. 9 is the best score. So the player would sort of have a 60%. The banker would have a 60% chance of winning. Okay, if the player gets an 8, so you wouldn't draw. And you can work this out in the other cases, and it's not exact because a 10 is more likely than a 9 or a 7. But you can figure out that these strategies on what the banker should do, and he has to do it. He doesn't have a choice. Okay, so if the banker has an 8 or 9, he will turn it over there, okay, etc. And then you can figure out what the odds of winning at this game are, and it's about a 1.2% house edge, which isn't bad, and plus you get to see all these people wearing nice suits if you're into fashion. So I mean, I did play this and I lost $50 very quickly. I will be honest. Okay, and then I stopped. Okay, but it was fun. I think it was more fun than any other games I played there. Okay, now blackjack is the game everybody is interested in. And blackjack is one of the great success stories of Monte Carlo simulation. But the success was way before At Risk came out. Okay, but the person here that deserves all the credit, and again is one of the most. I'd love to meet him someday. I would probably pay a fair amount of money to meet Edward Thorpe because he's just a genius. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so Edward Thorpe, don't know his age. He must be 60. He must be like 75. That's my guess. I don't know. But there's a nice book that talks about him a fair amount called Fortune's Formula. And that's mainly about, the Fortune's Formula is not blackjack, anything to do with blackjack per se. It's the Kelly Growth thing, which I'll talk about later, which is really important in investing and gambling. I mean, really, that's something that makes a lot of sense, and people just don't know it. And when it's used correctly, it's just fantastic. But basically, Thorpe just programmed blackjack on the computer with simulations, and it's so complicated. I mean, basically, the way it works is the player gets his 2 cards, and the dealer gets their cards, and you can see the dealer's up card, and the question is, what should you do? Well, the problem is, you think the player would win because he can decide what to do. He can take another card or not. But the problem is the player goes first, and if his total is over 21, he busts and he loses. It doesn't matter what the player does later. And the house has no choice in what they do. Basically, 16 or lower, they have to take cards until they go over 17 or over. And if they bust, well, that's great. But if you busted first, you lose. And so there's a word file that Jameson. Well, let me see if I can pull it up here. That there's a good basic strategy that would make you play blackjack pretty much even if you can remember it. And I don't have time to go through it all. But for example, you can cut the house edge to 1%. So if the dealer has a 7, 8, 9, 10, or ace up, you hit to a hard 17. Hard 17 means it's not an ace. Ace can be 1 or 11. You hit to a hard 17 or higher. If the dealer has a 2 through 6, you stand on a hard 12 through 16. Things you can do are double down. If you see the dealer has a 2 through 9 and you have a 10 or 11, basically is your total, then you should double the stakes because, gosh, you've got a great chance to get blackjack, and he's got a pretty crummy hand. Then aces, you've got a pair of aces. You can split that and play that like 2 hands or a pair of 8s. You can split that, never split 4, 5s, or 10s. And these are all determined by simulations. And some of them are fairly counterintuitive. But basically, I set up a couple of files on blackjack just to try out some some subset of this. But it really was a work of programming genius to program this game correctly. And we'll talk about the counting cards. Because when Thorpe first figured out his algorithm, they only used 1 deck. And if they use 1 deck in Vegas, in a casino, then you should go there and play and count cards because you can really make it so that you can win money. I mean, you really can win money with that. But they quickly went to several decks, and they wouldn't let them play. And I think there's a case before the Supreme Court on whether or not the casinos are allowed to throw out card counters. Because, I mean, I don't know if it's free speech or what. But that'll be an interesting Supreme Court case. I haven't checked up on that. But here's the combination that I wrote the spreadsheets for, and you can look at them if you're interested. Okay, if you have a 10 and a 6 and the dealer has a 7, you see you have 16, it looks pretty bad because, you know, if you get more than 5, you're going to bust and you lose. But if the dealer has a 7, okay, it turns out he's probably going to get over 16. You better take card. I mean, maybe you'll luck out and get an ace 2, 3, or 4, or 5, and you won't bust. But that one bothers people, but that is the right strategy. If you have a 10 and a 6 against a dealer 7, you should take another card. Okay, but now what is the counting cards thing? Again, figured out by Monte Carlo, and there are tons of systems on counting cards, and I don't know what the best system is for counting cards. But basically, the key to counting cards is this observation. Okay, 10s or aces, lots of 10s or aces left in the deck are good for the player. Low cards left are bad for the player. You can see why 10s left are good for the player because they'll make the house bust. Because, I mean, the house has to keep taking if he has 13 or 14. And if there's a lot of 10s left, the house is going to go away. Aces, it's quite not so obvious. But low cards left are bad for the player because the house won't bust. It's not quite that simple. But a simple system for counting. So you want to count cards in orders. You want to look at, unlike the games of craps and roulette, I mean, where your probabilities of winning don't change. I mean, they're pretty static. you want to basically put down a lot. You can vary your bet based on, if the deck is favorable to you, you can bet more, and that's where Kelly Growth comes in. If the deck is unfavorable, you can bet less. Okay, so the simple card counting strategy is, okay, when you give a minus, here's one I like. You give a -1 with an ace or 10 shows up, and a +1 of a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So when that count is positive, that's really good for you, because that means basically a lot of low cards are out of the deck, and basically you haven't seen any high cards. There's a lot of high cards in the deck. So one book, and I'll give you a reference. I mean, the best book on casino gambling, I think it's like 40 years old. I mean, I looked for a better book, but I mean, I'll give you and you can buy it on Amazon for $3.75, a used copy. I couldn't find my copy, so I just bought another one. But I'll give you the reference to that in a minute. But this count came from that book. And so if the count gets to, let's say, +5, the book recommended double the bet and then add a unit for each extra count. The problem is, with multiple decks, it's probably just not going to get there. Okay. With one deck, you could bide your time and wait for, if you pretty much knew what's left in the deck, then basically you can find a very favorable situation. But the question is, if you know the game is favorable to you, how much should you bet? And that's going to lead us to Kelly Growth. So let me open up the file on Kelly Growth, because I want to get to the tournament, because that's on everybody's minds, including mine today. So the best book on casino gambling, if you're interested, Alan Wilson, he was a Caltech professor. Don't know if he's still alive. I haven't checked on that. But Casino Gambler's Guide, I think it's called. But this is a really well-written book on baccarat, on blackjack, card counting had been invented when he wrote this book. I don't know how much it has on poker, but he talks about roulette. He talks about craps. But he really teaches you how to think about the odds. I mean, he does a little bit of simulation, but he really is good on how you actually compute probability. It's like on the Chemin de Fer and baccarat, I think he did a fantastic job explaining that game. But let's talk, and what we're going to talk about now applies to sports betting, it applies to investing, and it applies to blackjack or games where you think you know the chance of winning. So the question is, okay, suppose you have a simple example, you have an even money bet. In other words, okay, you have a probability P of winning, you win $1, and 1 minus P, you lose $1. P's got to be greater than half or you never want to play this game. But suppose P is 0.6, for example. You think, okay, if you bet sports. So you might bet on a football game and you think you have a 60% chance of winning this point spread bet. Okay, well, should you bet all your money? Well, no, because you could lose. I mean, if you want to maximize your if every bet suppose every time you pick 60% against the football point spread and you consistently do that, what percentage of your money should you bet every time you bet to maximize where you'll end up in the long run? Well, you don't want to ever bet all your money because one loss, you're gone. So that would be crazy. Well, the answer is real simple in this situation. Although football, you lose more when you lose a bet, but you can easily factor that in. You should bet this fraction of your money. So if you have a 60% chance of winning a bet, you should bet 20% of your money. And if you do that, then basically you can compute exactly the long-term growth rate of your capital. And I'm going to give you a finance example of how this works. And it actually defies logic, but it's absolutely true. So let's take a simple stock. There's a stock here, and every year there's a 50% chance it doubles. And there's a 50% chance you lose half your money. Okay, and I'll give you have a choice of that investment, or we could say an investment that makes 2% a year, which is better. Okay, you'd say this first one looks good because if you do expected value, half the time you win 100%, half the time you lose 50%, you win 25% a year. But the 2% is better because every year you'll grow by 2%. And it turns out if you simply own this one stock, see, what will happen is if you have $1, half the time you'll go to 2, and then the next year you'll probably lose half and come to 1. That's a fairly likely path. On the average, you'll not grow at all. Okay, so what Kelly Growth can do is tell you what's the way to allocate your capital if you know the probabilities involved in a situation, be it sports betting, be it investing in stocks. And Thorpe ran a hedge fund for years, Newport Partners, and if you look at the graph of how his hedge fund did, it never had a bad year because he would always use Kelly Growth to allocate his investments among the available investments. By the way, Thorpe invented Black-Scholes option pricing before Black and Scholes. He didn't get any credit because he didn't publish it. He didn't care. I mean, he made lots of money on it. So, I mean, he was a professor at MIT, but he left academia, and I'm sure he's never looked back and been sad he left academia. Okay, I like academia. I mean, I guess I'm a risk-averse person, so I like academia. I mean, it's safe and it's fun. Okay, and enjoy teaching the students also, of course. Okay, but let's take a simple example here, and then we'll go to the NCAA tournament. And be okay if I went to 5 after, Jameson? Okay, because I might go a few minutes over, just to make sure I can go through the sports, because it's not going to like cut off at 2 o'clock, is it?
No.
Okay, all right, fine. Okay, so I'll try and go. Of course, if people need to leave, they're welcome to leave, of course. Okay, so let's suppose. Remember, I said if you have the stock that heads you double and tails you lose half. In the long run, you grow your capital at 0%. So let's suppose you have 2 stocks like that are independent. If they're correlated, it doesn't work quite as well. So I have 2 stocks, and for each stock, there's a 50% chance it doubles, a 50% it cuts in half. Can I have my money? It doesn't seem like I should be able to grow my capital, right? Because any one of those stocks by itself, I can't grow my capital. But if you can allocate your money among those 2 stocks, you can grow your capital at 12% a year, which is just amazing. Okay, so the way Kelly Growth works, I mean, how do you figure out what fraction of your money you should allocate to all your available investments? So like in point spread betting, you can have a fraction P that you bet on the game and 1 minus P that you don't bet. It's very simple. You maximize your logarithmic utility. So like in other words, in this simple example, the 2 stocks could either both go up, both go down, one goes up, one goes down. You have solver figure out what fraction do you allocate to each asset to maximize your expected log of your final cash position, assuming you start with $1. And it turns out, not surprisingly, you should put half your money in each stock. So what I did is I set up at risk to model this, and this blows the students away. They love this example. So in other words, I varied with the sim table. I can put up to 90% of my money in stock 1, 80% of my money in stock 2, 70% of my money in stock 3, 60% of my money in stock, 90% in stock 1, or 80% in stock 1, or 70% in stock 1, or 0% in stock 1. Okay, and so basically, with the sim table, I can model these 10 strategies. So I start with $1, and I use risk to uniform to model if the stock goes up or down. Then I modeled my final cash position, and then I want the long-term rate of return for each of these situations, putting 90% in stock 1, 80% in stock 1. Again, the best deal, it turns out, is putting 50% in stock 1. And by the way, your log utility here was, expected value was 11.111. And your long-term growth is always e to the log utility. Amazing result. And if you take the expected value of the log of your return on a 1-period investment, and you take e to that power, that is your long-term growth rate. That risk will verify this. So I ran this for 50 periods. And then your growth rate would be how much money you have at the 50th, after the 50th year, divided by what you started with, which is 1, and you take it to the 0.02 power, the 1/50th. That's your rate of return. So then I ran this thing, again, to save time, I ran this thing 1,000 times, and here's what's amazing. You put 90% of your money in stock 1, you'll grow at 5% a year. 80% in stock 1, 8% a year. 70% in stock 1, 10% a year. And remember, if you put all your money in one of those stocks, you don't grow at all. But you put half your money in each stock, you'll grow at 12.1% a year in that model. And it's called volatility pumping. It's sort of a version of buy low, sell high. See, every year I allocate my money. Suppose this is a 0.5. Okay, so every year, though, I put half my money in each stock, and then my return would be the fraction in stock 1, okay, times the beginning value of my portfolio, times what the value of stock, what happens to the return on stock 1, et cetera. So in other words, what I do is I sort of get more shares of an investment when it's low than when it's high, and so then it's like buy low, sell high. I mean, it's amazing. If you put all your money in one of these stocks, your annual growth rate would be 0, because half the time you double, half the time you'd lose half, even though the expected return on 1 period would be 25%. Okay, if you look at it that way. But basically, it's amazing that the volatility pumping, I got this out of Leuenberger's book, Investment Science, which is a great book. But I mean, anybody should use Kelly Growth if they're in investments to figure out how to allocate their investments between different investment opportunities. Come up with what you think the probabilities are for what could happen. And if you allocate your money according to Kelly Growth, you'll have a portfolio that will maximize your expected long-run return, which makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, sports betting. I mean, let's just go to the NCAA tournament because that'll take a few minutes. Okay. I guess I'm rooting for VCU. Impressed the heck out of me, even though my model says they don't have much of a chance. I follow Purdue closely, even though I can't stand them, and I thought they were a very good team. And VCU, after 2 minutes, I could see those guys were from another planet, though, how hard they hustled harder than anybody I've ever seen. I think they have a shot. Butler keeps lucking out, and I just don't know how long that can continue, although I love to watch it. Okay, so how do you simulate things in sports? Okay, and there's lots more to this, but tournaments. Okay, my best friend is Jeff Sagarin, does the USA Today sports ratings. You have to know how good each team is. Okay, so like these, the absolute value of the team's rating here doesn't matter. The difference matters. So I think Ohio State's playing Kentucky. I'm not sure if that's tonight. I haven't had time to follow up. But Ohio State is a 96.97, which is a 97-point rating, and Kentucky's an 89.67. That indicates Ohio State is 7 points better than Kentucky. Will Ohio State win for sure tonight? Of course not. I mean, Butler shouldn't have beat Pittsburgh, but they did. What is the uncertainty in a sporting event if you know how good the teams are? Well, you have to know the standard deviation in each sport relative to the prediction of the bookies or the Sagarin ratings. And the answer is in college basketball, the standard deviation about the point spread is 10 points. In pro football and college football, it's 14 points. And in pro basketball, it's about 12 points. So what I did is set up a spreadsheet that just plays out all the games. When a team's eliminated, I make the rating 0, so they have no chance to continue. So, for instance, it looks up here, Ohio State's in 97, that was the first round. So what it does, okay, well, let's just show what it does from the first round on. Okay, so the first round, Team 1 played the play-in team, Texas San Antonio. Let's suppose I make the rating a 65, which is what it was. Okay, so Ohio State should have won by 32, which is probably about what they won by. Okay, so then basically I play out the game. Okay, I look up Ohio State's rating, I look up George Mason's rating, and I use a risk normal with a standard deviation of 10 to play out the game. So this is the amount of points Ohio State wins by. So there they won by 35. There they won by 55. There they won by 41. Basically, they're not going to lose. There are 3 standard deviation in favor, which gives them 1.5 chances in 1,000 of losing by this model. And so, I mean, that's pretty small. Okay, so then Ohio State won. They go on to the next game and then would play Team 4 there, Villanova, and then I play that game out. And it just follows the teams down to the bottom, knowing the only thing you need to know to use this spreadsheet is you type in the names of the teams in the order they're listed in the bracket and make sure that the second region you type in plays the first region in the semifinals. And if you just enter the numbers, you can use this every year. Okay, so then what it does down here, it figures out who wins. They're Florida won. They're Duke. God, I don't like Duke. I have a shirt that says, "Breathe if you hate Duke." I love that shirt. Okay, Kentucky wins. Duke wins. Ohio State wins. Arizona wins. BYU wins. Our secretary is from BYU, so I hope they do well also. But what I did, which is really neat with that risk, I think, and I have a website if you're interested. I post the updated odds on WayneWinston.com. I just post sports stuff there. I don't have time to do much else. I should probably post other stuff, but just haven't had time. But what I did down here, okay, I hid some columns here, so let's unhide. Okay, so I figured out basically how many games each team won, and then I used the risk mean function. This was a little tricky, but it shows you the great capabilities at risk. A risk mean function to figure out the chance of each team winning each possible number of games. And so if I run this thing, let's say 1,000 times, 500 times, shouldn't take long. Okay, so if I run this thing, it plays out the tournament 500 times, and it will figure out that probably each team wins a certain number of games. And then you could really figure out actually for each game in your bracket in advance, what's the chance each team would win a certain number of games. So here's my odds approximately. So let me show you this. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about other sports, things you could bet on in sports, because I think there's real potential to beat some of the things that are coming out now. Okay, so Ohio State, there's a 23% chance they would win exactly 2 games, a 15% chance they'll win exactly 3 games, a 20% chance they'll win exactly 4 games, a 13% chance they'll win exactly 5 games, which would mean they lose in the finals, and a 29% chance they win the championship. I've got, who else has a decent chance to win? Duke a 13% chance. The problem is Duke plays Ohio State in the semifinals, which I think will probably happen. Be a great game. Kansas has a better chance to win than Duke, even though Duke may be a better team, because Kansas has a much easier bracket after everybody. They've got teams like Richmond and Butler in there, but who knows? San Diego State's better than people think. I mean, although they're underdogs to Connecticut tonight. I mean, I'm surprised by that. Connecticut's got a great player in Kimball Walker, but we'll see what happens. But you've heard exactly the odds there. So we're almost out we're at 2 o'clock, but give me 2 or 3 more minutes. So what are the bets that are available in sports? Let me give you a quick breakdown. You can obviously bet on a tournament, or just fill out your bracket. But you can bet on point spreads. Like I said, Connecticut's favored by 1 tonight. If Connecticut wins by more than 1, you win $10. If Connecticut wins by less than 1, you lose $11. And if Connecticut wins by 1, then no money changes hands. So you can bet on point spread betting in football. You can bet on in basically anything but baseball. And then, although you can probably bet on runs then. But the other thing you can do is bet on the money line. You get odds on teams winning. So like if Connecticut and San Diego State are about even, you could bet $10 on either team to win. You probably have to bet $11 on each team to win 10. You could probably bet $11. And the odds are, my book Mathletics talks about how the money line works and things like that. It's a book on math and sports, has a lot of at-risk stuff in there, particularly for evaluating baseball players if you're interested. So the money line you can bet on, and I think it's really hard to beat point spreads consistently or the money line, although people say they do it. I just don't think you can do it. I think it's harder than beating the stock market. The sports, particularly in pro football, people know pro football. The odds are tough to beat it. But one thing I think you can beat is the totals line. In other words, they'll be on Bodog.com if you want to see where these lines are. Probably the best place. Okay, but so I don't know in the Connecticut San Diego State game. It's actually the USA Today has the totals lines. Maybe the total was 150. You bet on the total points in the game. And basically, I think if you had a good math model, which I think I do for pro basketball, I could do a better job of setting those lines than basically the Las Vegas. There are consulting firms in Las Vegas that set odds. Do they use that risk? I'd really like to know. They probably use something like it. The problem with the totals line is Tim Donahue, the referee who fixed the games, he fixed the totals line. How would a referee fix the totals line? He would simply call more fouls to make the score higher, make the game longer. And you can prove mathematically he did that. In the games he supposedly fixed, he called more fouls. You can actually check the records and show that that's true. So those are the main bets on teams. But the thing that is really hot now, because I guess people want to bet on anything, their lives must be empty or something here, but the props bets. See, I don't know if I have time to go on Bodog.com, but you can bet Kobe Bryant, the next game they play, will he get more than 7 rebounds? That gives you great interest in watching the game because it probably won't be decided until the end of the fourth quarter, even the game's not close. So you can build models on these props bets. Okay, what's the chance that Kevin Durant will score more than 28 points in a game? You bet over/under on things like that. You bet Denver will score get more than 75 yards rushing in a game. If you build sophisticated models for those, I've got too much stuff to do in my jobs to worry about that. If you could estimate the probabilities based on those sophisticated models of those props bets, and the number of rebounds Kobe Bryant gets is probably plus on. You need to adjust for the team he's playing. He plays Phoenix, he'll get more rebounds because they shoot the ball more. If he plays, who's a slow-paced team? New Orleans doesn't have many possessions. There won't be many rebounds in a game against New Orleans. But if you adjust for that kind of stuff, I think you can do, particularly in college basketball props bets, there's not that, people know a lot more about the pros than college. If you could create a good database and really do a lot of stuff with that, I think props bets can be beaten. I think the consulting firms that set those odds, honestly, they may be smarter than you or I, but I mean, my guess is on every bet they set, I mean, if you researched one particular type of bet more than they did and had the right data, you could come up with better estimates of probabilities than them, and you would make money. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who think they can do that. Well, I think I ran over, so do we have any questions?
Wayne, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks. I enjoyed it. Let me see if I can go back to this. Maybe I can see event in progress. Maybe I can see questions. No, I don't see how to go back to it.
Let's see, we don't have any yet. Let's wait.
Somewhere, I mean, on the toolbar on the bottom.
Yeah,
I see chat. Okay. Yeah. So I guess we don't have any?
Well, we can wait a minute. I just wanted to tell everybody that I will send out a link to this recording, and if you watch this recording but missed the live broadcast and you have any questions, you can feel free to email me also, and I'll get a hold of Wayne and I'll pass that along. Yeah, let's wait a minute or two and see if a question or two comes in. I know that you'll. Oh yeah.
Okay, go.
To where our files are.
I don't know where they are.
Oh,
I'll send you the NCA file right after this.
Okay, that'd be great.
But I don't know where the other files are. I mean, I think I know they're up there on your site somewhere. It's probably too big to send by email, all the files.
Right, it is.
But let me know if you can't find them, and I'll get them to you somehow. Okay. But I'll send the NCA file right after.
Good.
That's not a big file.
Oh, somebody wonders if they can take classes with you online.
I don't have any online classes, but I do go to companies and teach classes, and I'm always just give me a call at 812-855-3495. If I don't have any online class, I've never figured out how to do. Our school has online classes, but I really don't. I do mainly in-class classes.
Can you describe mathletics?
It's a book on math and sports. Basically, it's the math that baseball players, baseball teams, football teams, and basketball teams use to make their teams better. We've worked for the Dallas Mavericks, the New Jersey Nets, and some other teams, so I know more about basketball than other sports. But the math of baseball has been very well developed by people like Bill James, and so I start by explaining baseball math, then I explain football math, and then basketball math, like how do you evaluate players, how do you evaluate lineups, where the at risk comes in the baseball part. How do you figure out how many runs a team would score if they had 9 Barry Bonds or 9 Albert Pujols or 9 Josh Hamiltons? And what you really need to do is run a simulation model of basketball to figure that out, or use Markov chains, but a simulation was easier for me. But if you like math and sports, and clearly you know, if you know freshman college math, which you clearly do if you're listening to this, I think you'll enjoy Mathletics. I mean, there's really no other. A nice book came out called Sportscasting now instead of Forecasting, which is a good book, but it's not really it's got some interesting results. But my book really does explain the math that you like. The mathematics of gambling is also in the book, Sports Gambling. But it's $20, I believe, from Princeton University Press on Amazon.
How does Kelly growth change when assets are correlated?
You would, okay, in the spread, let me pull, that's a very good question. When the spreadsheet came up here, you see I had a 25% chance both stocks would go up, 25% chance both would go down. If they're correlated, it might be something like this. 35% chance both go up, 35% both go down, and maybe 15%. In other words, they're more likely to go up and down together. So let me just run the asset allocation. I mean, I don't think it'll make much difference here. Where's the solver at in? I think my solver disappeared. Okay, premium solver I've got. This is 2007 here. So if I would click solve, okay. See, you still put half your money in each stock, but your growth rate would be smaller as you'd expect, 7%. The fact that they're correlated really lessens the effect of the volatility pumping. So you'd have the same strategy, but your capital would not grow as quickly. But a very good question.
Good. What's behind the 2P1 example?
Well, basically, what you want to do is maximize, okay, basic calculus. Okay, with probably P, you would have, let's say, the logarithm, okay, you would double your money, I guess, and with 1 minus P, let me just put this in here. So basically, if we would, suppose we have a 70% chance here that this would happen. Yeah, let's see if I can do this off the top of my head here. But okay, probably P, you would have, let's say, $2. No, you wouldn't have $2. That's the whole point. I'm sorry. If you bet a fraction X, with probably P, that was where my mistake was. You would, okay, you would win X dollars, and with probably 1 minus P, and you're maximizing log utility. and probably 1 minus P, okay, you would lose X dollars. And if you set the derivative equal to 0 there, you'd find out that X should equal 2P minus 1. That's where it comes from. And you might say, why do you want to maximize the log utility? Well, that's easy to explain. So after a lot of tosses, where would you be? Suppose you start with $1. Your period end cash equals $1 times your return on the first period times your return on the second period times your return on the third period, so et cetera. And if you want to maximize this product, you can maximize the sum of the logs. If you want to maximize the expected value, assuming the trials are independent, that's where the logarithmic growth comes from. But it was invented by a guy named Kelly, who unfortunately got mugged to death in New York City in the 1950s, got killed walking down the street. New York is much safer now, of course. But, I mean, that's really sad because he worked for Bell Labs. I don't know if Bell Labs is even still there now. But basically, this is where it comes from. If you set the derivative equal to 0 here to maximize log utility, you would find, I believe, X, the fraction you should invest, would be 2P minus 1. That is, because I have to go. Actually, I have to go to something else now. So.
Oh, okay. Well.
But people can. My email is winston@indiana.edu. If people want to ask me questions, email me. I'm glad to. Or my phone number is 812-855-3495. I'm always interested in how people use that risk.
Well, we really appreciate this, Winston.
Oh, thanks. I enjoyed it. Hopefully, I'll do another one sometime.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Thanks, Jameson. Thanks to everybody who listened.
Yes.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.